ado, let me introduce our panelists. And they're going to tell you a little bit about what they do for a living. But I'm going to start with that. J.W. Stewart is at WVIT and formerly at ESPN. Jim Fuller is at the New Haven Register. And Joe D'Ambrosio is at WTIC-AM. He's also the voice of the Huskies, so he's had a very busy week. All these guys have. And on Channel 30 and works with UConn. And hello. Have a seat.
Thanks. How you doing?
Good.
What's up, Jake? How was New York?
Oh, it's fast.
Did you bring any pine tar in your hand?
Just start, Joe. Just start.
So we just started, and we're going to have you guys go down and tell these people what you do for a living.
You want me to start?
Yeah,
I'll
go
start
ahead.
because he just got here. Let
Okay,
him
good.
relax.
Go for it.
I have been in radio since 1978, or as I tell people when I actually had hair on my head, not on my face. I've been the voice of UConn football, men's basketball, and baseball since 1992 on WTIC 1080, which has been more prominently featured in the news over the past week for our afternoon talk show host, who will be indicted by the federal government today, which we're all very proud of. I also do television at WVIT with JW and the diminutive Kevin Nathan. And now I'm looking forward to going out on the golf course after doing basketball and football for 7 months. So
I've been at the Register since I was about your guys' age. I started there when I was in college, and they haven't got rid of me yet, so that's pretty good. I've covered UConn women 12 years. I had it for 4 years, then took a step back, and I've had the last 12 years, been to 11 Final Fours. They've won 7 national titles, so it's not the worst thing in the world.
but he doesn't take any credit
No,
for it.
I do not. They won in spite of my coverage. And I covered UConn football as well, and during this time of year, I cover whatever they ask me to cover.
I grew up in Middletown, Rhode Island, which is right next to Newport. I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Started my career in newspapers, worked in newspapers for 4 years at the Poughkeepsie Journal. Got into regional television in New York, spent 12 years at ESPN. And I'm a new guy on the block locally. I started at NBC Connecticut back in January.
Hi, I'm Jeff Jacobs, the sports columnist for the Hartford Courant. And I think, unlike these other guys, I went to what is kind of considered a journalism factory, the University of Missouri. And these guys rose to where they are based on their merit. I just decided I'd jump in on something that was entirely established and let that pull me along. And so far, I've tricked them to this point. So. But I've been at the Hartford Courant since 1984. I was an NHL hockey writer, NHL first in the Philadelphia area, and then that's what brought me to Hartford, to the Whalers. And just before the Whalers left, I became the general columnist, which is pretty cool because I've gotten to go to a lot of different places around the world.
This is a sports PR class. And so I would like you guys to give us your impression of PR people and tell me why you think of us the way you do it. We can take it, by the way.
Not all of you can.
Uh-oh.
No, I mean, frankly, in my position, as far as the play-by-play is concerned and the TV work, to a lesser degree, in that regard, I don't have as much contact with public relations people. I have more contact with sports information people. We're kind of like public relation people for the school, for the school. Okay, so then I have had a lot of contact with them, and there are some very good ones who are willing to work with you and help you. And then there are some others who have to be cajoled along the way, and then there are some others who are just walking, talking stop signs, and that doesn't work for what I have to do for the play-by-play end of it. And I also do a nightly talk show on WTIC radio, which during the baseball season can be as short as 10 minutes long. I'm not exactly working 5.5 hours like Francesa, but I'm not making 7 figures of salary either, like Francesa. And we'll have public relations people who will ask us, will pitch their ideas for a client. Most of the time it's somebody who's written a book. Sometimes it's, somebody who's come up with something that will help, like a golf game or tennis or, baseball statistics or something like that. And again, most of them are good because they'll contact you and then they'll follow up and say, did you get my email? Are you interested? And if you tell them no, most of the time, 95% of the time for me, I don't know what it's like for you, Jimmy, or you, Jake, they'll say, okay, and understand that it just doesn't fit your fit your format. So really, for the most part, as far as strict PR people are concerned, they've been pretty good for me.
Yeah, I have no complaints with the PR people. I was telling Andrea, when I was in school, I was taught that the PR people were the bad guys. That they were the enemy. They were the dark side. Now, the guy who told me this, my journalism professor in school, he had been a journalist, then he was a journalism professor, then he went on to be a lawyer. So you talk about going to the dark side. That's it right there. I've been very fortunate. I've never had any really bad dealings with PR people. When I was at ESPN in the studio, I didn't deal with any of the PR people because I was in the studio. But in the field, where I've been recently, I had a chance to talk with and deal with Pat McKenna, who's the SID for the UConn women's team. He's great, young guy, gets it. I think is really good about sending us people, especially after they won the other night, Tuesday, out in Nashville. I mean, he was looking all over. He'd send someone over there to me, and he'd send someone to you guys, and the next TV station. So I think he understands what it is we're trying to do, and he's very helpful. So again, very fortunate that I have a pretty good view of the PR SID world. I've not had any issues with them.
Jimmy, you want to go?
Sure. I mean, I think there are two levels, like he was saying, of PR people. There's the SIDs. I covered the pro tennis tournament in New Haven, and the PR person there, Matt Ventine, is phenomenal. He does everything that we need. Gives us there are other parts that aren't so good. People that send me emails that have no concept of what it is I do. My one issue is medical PR people. They send me emails to talk to these doctors, and I respond that we have Yale New Haven Hospital in New Haven, and they have some of the greatest surgeons and medical minds anywhere in the world. So I really don't, if I need to call someone, I'm going to call Yale New Haven because we have a relationship with them, and they're going to give me better stuff than someone from out in Kansas City or Chicago, or so that part. And then they'll send me just emails of pro sport that I don't have anything to do with, and I really have I usually don't respond to those because you're really just not. It's just a waste of your time. It's really a waste of my time because I'm not going to talk to someone about what happened to Jonathan Taves of the Chicago Blackhawks if I cover UConn women's basketball. I think that's where you have to know what your clientele is before you just start sending them emails. And then if someone doesn't respond, you don't need to send them 3 more emails because chances are if I want your client, I'll say, oh, that sounds great. When can we set this up? So I think that's the part that can, at some, particularly during the heart of the season when you've got 39 other things on your plate that you'll get up in the morning and I'll have 28 emails and 24 from PR people that I want nothing to do with.
How many people here are serious about sports PR? Or are you daddies and mommies just sending you here just to kill time? Nobody serious?
No,
You're all serious?
yeah.
Some are shy, I would
So
think.
I came here to talk serious stuff. Really. So far, most of the discussion's been centered around who can set who up for an interview. From my perspective, that's about 1% of what I look at you guys as potentially being. Some of the comments so far touched on sort of how journalists and PR and public relations people view each other. And I might be the oldest person in the room.
No.
Oh, you might, well, close, right? But when I went to school, like I said, I went to the University of Missouri, and I don't want to like lord that over anybody because it certainly didn't make me great. It only made me serviceable. But they have an inordinate amount of resources, and I took advertising courses and PR courses back when I majored in, at that point, editorial. And it was a real view by a lot of jaundiced journalists, tough, ink-stained guys, that you guys were nothing more than flacks. There to serve my, you know what I mean? Here, can I get you water? Can I get you that? And I thought people, when I was your guys' age, I saw older journalists treat people like you shabbily. It embarrassed me. As the years went along, and as newspapers became less and less overriding central force into now a very scattered journalistic landscape, I've seen you guys treat people like me like, which should embarrass people in your line of work or potential line of work to no end. There's a lot of ways to look at trying to get to the truth of how you people want to represent your companies and how we as journalists want to try and represent what we think is the truth or getting at more facts. And it doesn't take condescension or anger or fluffery. It takes a genuine discussion among both sides to help get to where everybody wants to get to eventually. Like I said, I can go on forever, but I'm going to bore you.
This is powerful stuff, and I hope you guys are taking a lot of notes. This is a very important thing. So what can we do right? Let's start with you. Our job is to help you do your job. How do we do that right?
I had a long ride from Eastern Connecticut, so I had a lot of time to think about this.
This is good.
So, all right. First of all, I see a lot of young women here, and I think it's easier on you guys because one of the real arts of public relations is conversation, easy conversation. And you guys are better than that than young guys. A lot of young guys struggle with, and I have a son who's 16, and so I live with this every day. Young guys struggle with not having either huge egos or or conversely, sometimes they don't want to speak up because they're not easy with their words. They're not easy gabbers. And a lot of young women are very blessed by being easy gabbers, and that's really good from my view, because it helps break down barriers. Look, there's a lot of stuff that you guys are going to do in your lifetime, and a lot of stuff we do that is really rudimentary. It's like, we have to make sure our Wi-Fi works when we're covering something. We have to make sure we have access to a phone. Now we have iPhones. In the old days, it was just get me a place to, right? Give me a place to sit, give me an outlet, and give me a freaking telephone, and we can make it happen, But, what I'm saying is there's a lot of things. Make sure your press notes are there. Make sure there's a seat assigned. And from our standpoint, it's make sure we get our stories filed on deadline. Things are very fundamental. And a lot of people in your position have just kind of I'm more concerned with meeting somebody that is really big from ESPN that's going to make me famous so I can go off to create my own company and market something, So there's a lot of areas where people jump right past the real important parts of our job, and some of them are very fundamental and they're very elementary. So I don't think either side should overlook that. But on the other hand, it's you guys are going to work for somebody, and I don't know who that person is. It could be a corporation, could be a school, and those powerful people are going to try and tell you what to do. So you're going to have to kiss up to them. And people people like us are after truths, and sometimes the truths are wonderful. Like the UConn women, they all went to school and they won all the freaking games. How perfect is that? That's wonderful. That's a PR person's dream. But sometimes kids cheat. Sometimes kids get arrested, and you have the weight of the people you're working for coming down on you versus somebody coming at you and asking you. We're almost like the cops sometimes. What happened? And it is a. I've never been on that side of the fence, so I don't know the art of that, but I do know where I'm coming from.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I have been on that side of the fence where your bosses essentially want you to, as one of my old bosses said, tell the truth in its most favorable light, which was his way of saying, lie for us. And I've been on that pressure, and what you have to do is see the world through these guys' eyes. We don't work for them, but they're our constituency. And if I am in job A, and I screw this man, and then I go to job B, he's not gonna forget it. So what you carry with you as a PR person is your own reputation. And that has to do with balancing it. And you have to get to a position with your bosses where you can't say, I mean, they write the checks, I won't do this. But what you can say is, if we do this, this is the outcome we can expect. If we tell this man a half-truth, because that's usually what they want us to do. If we tell them a half-truth and we just leave out parts, he's gonna find it out. It's very easy right now. And then it's back to your credibility, and the next story, and what you tell your bosses is, and the next story he writes about us is not gonna be good. We need him, we need to partner with him. So I think these are really powerful
The
observations.
less truth you tell us, the more we're gonna look into what's actually going on.
Thank you.
And if you're gonna insult us by trying to pass off a story, we've been doing this for a long time, and I can smell a lie a mile away. And if you're gonna not tell me something, I'm gonna find out one way or the other, and it's in your best interest to help me find out, because if I find out on my own, you're probably not gonna like what I find out.
Right.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, the honesty angle to me is the most important one. You have to understand what we do for a living, and we understand what you do for a living. And the fact that, there might be sports writers who show up like 15 minutes late to an appointment, and then they don't get the beginning of that's just because Dom's walking in. I just digressed. I digressed there perfectly. This is Dom Amore for the Courant. He covers UConn men's basketball and baseball, and he is the second most handsome Italian man on this panel. So everybody else is tied for first.
And he gave me my start in this profession, so I'm not
So we
sure.
can
Thank
blame
or
him?
not.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, you distracted me as always. But the honesty angle, and understand what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is not screw the person you work for. We're trying to get the story out there to our listeners, to our viewers, and to our readers. And like Jake said, sometimes the story's not a pretty one. But if you give us the truth, if you give us honesty, then we're going to report the story, and we're not going to do anything that's going to, intentionally mess with the people you work with. If we tell the story and the story's not good, you have to understand we're not living in, nirvana here. That there's going to be parts of the business that aren't good. The thing that I get most annoyed with in my line is when public relations people or sports information people just don't help. They just are everywhere. Anytime you ask them anything, it's no. No this, no that. Well, then I'm not going to look favorably on working. This is a very small example. It doesn't, it's not as wide ranging as what Jeff was talking about. But on our broadcasts, we like to try and interview the opposing coach because it gives a good viewpoint. And there are some people, and there are some schools, like Michigan State, will jump to help you. Then there are the people from the SEC who we dealt with this weekend who couldn't be a bigger pain in the and you can't, we ask them, no, our coaches aren't available. Well, there's a day between games. You can't give us an assistant coach to talk for 4 minutes
Joe, will you
for our
just go
pregame
around
show?
us in that case? Will
Huh?
you just go around us in that case?
Oh, no, we can't. No, because in that case, going around doesn't do us any good.
Okay.
We'll go to, the smartest guy in the room, who's usually the radio play-by-play guy. So, so that's, but just understand what we're trying to do is not, we're trying to do our job, much like you're trying to do yours. And there's never a point where those two things can't mesh in a good way. Obviously, you're going to work for some people when you get out into the big bad world that are going to make your jobs tough. But that doesn't mean you have to make our jobs tough. That's the bottom line on that. Just like we work for people, I'm not going to name any names, but we work for people who make our lives tough, and that doesn't mean we have to make your lives tough. There has to be a happy medium somewhere.
So, Don, what we're talking about is how can we best work with you as sports information people, or PR people? How can we do it right?
Well, the biggest complaint that I have, maybe it's been addressed already, is so often, public relations people in their desire to control things, get in the way of a positive story. You know, they get in the way of getting, I mean, by trying to control the message, they end up getting no message out there. And one of the examples I always use was, you know, when we, very often on the bit when I was doing baseball, where we get these, you know, invitations or requests to come and cover a charity dinner or a charity golf event. And then when you get there, it's like, well, stand behind this line and don't talk. It's like, come, but don't talk to anybody. And one of the worst, you know, I was doing the golf tournament that Joe Torre runs every year to raise awareness for his domestic violence foundation. And he had Bill Clinton there. And, you know, Clinton stopped to talk to all the reporters who had come, and he was just getting going, and me, oh, no, the PR people come in, break up the interview. Oh, no, you can't talk to him. He's got to get on the golf course. He's got to do this, he's got to do that. You can't, you know. And now he was all too happy. He was just getting warmed up. He was happy to talk to us. They broke it up, and what they did was cost the foundation that they're there to try to get publicity for. They ended up costing the foundation a chance to probably be on the front page of the New York Times and the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the front page of every paper around the world, getting Bill Clinton talking about the cause that they're there to raise awareness of. All because they had to get in there and, oh no, he's 1 minute behind schedule. And they broke up an opportunity to get, you know, the PR boon of a lifetime. Very often you see that. And it's the same thing, what Joe's talking about. It happens at UConn a lot, to be honest. It happens, you know, with the Yankees and Red Sox a lot. Not so much with the Boston teams, because they're aware that they want to get some publicity in Connecticut, but they get in the way of a positive story. And so often, you know, with UConn, you want to write something that's positive, and you can't do it because you can't get the access. And that's all. Don't be so obsessed with controlling the schedule and controlling. You can't control the message, but you can influence it. But don't get in the way of a positive story. That's often the mistake that PR people make.
The biggest mistake that a PR person makes, Don just hit on it, is just try and be a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
Do not fight all your instincts to be bossy. Fight every one of them. And that's why I hit on why women are often more successful at this than guys. Fight the impulse to try and take control. Fight it. It's the worst thing a public relations person could be.
Right.
A two-way thing is the most important. A one-way thing, either doing it or allowing it to happen to you, is the worst. And these guys have hit a lot on about access so far, and I just want to frame that a little bit because it's so important to them. Because I spent the first half of my career being a reporter and the second half being a columnist, and access to the facts and truth are paramount. And so much of what I do is built on the back of what they do. So they're trying to hit on the art of access and communicating to each other to get those facts. People like me come along, and here's another I want to hit, because I want to lead to like the art of communication with a columnist or an opinion maker, editorial people. One of these guys have gotten out a scoop, or in this day it's hard in order to get a scoop, but a certain area of information, and then someone like me comes along and wants to observe that and comment on it, and sometimes the opinions are harsh, sometimes they're wonderful about what you're covering, but the public relations person can talk to me and hopefully have a relationship that is, I guess the word is background. I like to think of it as off the record, because unless they tell you that, like, they're going to tell you that, quote me on this, Joe Schmo is an idiot. You know, you don't get that, but you have the background with the public relations person that knows the incident or knows the characters involved and can help you understand the truth on one level while you're trying to, like, frame it in a way that is that is either least destructive to your people or most, if it's something good, even better, that, hey, this is really great, but did you know that this also happened? And, you know, keep me out of it, but like, now that you understand a fuller picture, that's very powerful stuff, and for me personally as a columnist, different than information gathering, but background and framing, very powerful for opinion makers.
Jeff, you just opened the door to, oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make a comment that I think it's important that you don't cater to the publication your person works for. When I first started in this business, I did some small weekly papers at the same time I worked for the Register, and I went to do a story for my weeklies, and it was at UConn, and they couldn't have treated me worse. The guy didn't show up, he's like giving me an attitude, and I got the story anyways because I already knew the player. Then a week later, they're calling me, I come up there, the guy's ready to shine my shoes and buy me lunch because I'm there for the New Haven Register. You never know where that person's going to be. The person at the weekly paper in Milford, Connecticut, he might be at ESPN in a month. So you should treat people based on what it is they're trying to do and what you're trying to do. Don't have this, well, they're from ESPN, so I'm going to take care of them, but you know, they're from some small Connecticut paper, so I'm not really going to waste my time because, A, it's not the way you'd want to be treated, and it's not going to help you get to where you want to get to in your career.
It's a very powerful observation. We're really trained as PR people not to give anybody, to treat all members of the media equally. But I remember some comments that you made a couple of sessions ago that I would love for you to bring forward. The whole idea that
I didn't realize you were gonna take
guys
notes.
put your time in with the team and
Shocking.
talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, realistically, you know, I mean, realistically, you know, your big organizations in sports are going to get so inundated with requests for interviews and whatnot that they're going to probably bend over backwards for the New York Times. They're going to bend over backwards for Sports Illustrated. They're going to bend over backwards for ESPN. There's not that's unavoidable. I mean, you have to. And some of that's on us not to take it personally. And I've been on both sides of it. When I was a beat writer covering the Giants and the Yankees, I was a low man on the totem pole, priority-wise, and even more so then because there was no internet. You know, today with the internet, really whether you write for Mayberry or ESPN, it doesn't matter. You know, once it gets out there. So some of that's unavoidable. But you know, there is a certain, I think there is a certain obligation on the part of a, if it's a sports franchise or a college, to make sure that you're taking care of the people who are there all the time and traveling, because their organizations are spending a lot of money to travel with that team and to cover that team. And like in my case, you know, we're the one paper that goes everywhere with UConn. So the Courant is not sending me to Germany to cover UConn or to Seattle or all over the country and all over the world. They're not sending me to do that so that I could write, you know, so-and-so reported such and such. You know, I've got to get that stuff first, or else, hey, I'm not going to be there, and the next person's going to be a lot tougher than I am because, you know, the nice guy approach didn't work. So, you know, there is a certain, you know, the athletes or the newsmakers that you represent, you know, you can only be as good as they allow you to be, and that's another thing that on our end you have to learn not to take personally. That, you know, some athletes that I've covered, for instance, Gary Sheffield with the Yankees was an example of it. Shabazz Napier is an example of it. They kind of recognize the guys who are there all the time, and they will go out of their way to talk to you, as opposed to the people who parachute in. And I think if you do that, the people who parachute in probably understand it, and the people
Some of them do.
Some of them do, and the people who cover you every day play a large part in molding your public image. On the other hand, some athletes, Kurt Schilling was an example of this, Alex Rodriguez was an example of this, are guys who would kind of ignore the people who are there all the time, and then when, you know, a national guy would come in, hey, Mr. Gammons, how are you? You know, and that's something that, in the long run, is counterproductive, because those people will put something out once in a while. but the people who cover you all. Ultimately, people's image of the UConn team, for instance, is largely molded by what the UConn beat writers write, because the national people are reading our stuff to prepare for their broadcasts. So you do have to not draw a line based on the size of the paper or the size of the radio station or the size of the TV station, but do take care of those organizations that spend the money and invest the resources to cover you on a regular basis. That's what's really most important.
There's a time when we are representing a client, and it's almost inevitable in sports that there's going to be a crisis. And we actually have a whole class in this class devoted to crisis. Players behaving badly, coaches behaving badly, the sport behaving badly. How do we deal with you on that when those situations happen? Because now we're in a conflict where we know that our client is about to look bad.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You've always been a good leadoff hitter.
Yeah, I've always been a good leadoff hitter, yeah. Good line drive hitter, not a lot of speed. You find with almost every story, particularly negative stories, that the sooner you get out front and address it, the sooner it goes away. That the sooner the people kind of get, the sooner, and in fact, in some cases, some people are very smart in that they're out there so much addressing something that's unpleasant that it becomes boring and old hat and it goes away even faster. But it takes more energy to avoid it than it does to get out and meet it head on. And the story has longer legs when there's mystery to it, as opposed to when it's just all out there. And that's, the great deal of mystery I always use. Joe DiMaggio was very mysterious throughout his entire life. Did not really open up much, didn't talk much, really kind of kept his, and as a result, people never lost their fascination with him. That years after he died, books were being written for people who were trying to somehow get at the real Joe DiMaggio. Derek Jeter is very much like that. Derek Jeter is very closed, doesn't let you in, doesn't let people know really what he's about and who he is. And as a result, the fascination with him is endless. And it'll probably be endless 50 years after he's gone. But those people who are like out and open, it just goes away. So when you have a negative story, the best thing to do, to the extent that you could do it, when there are legal ramifications, you have to follow those parameters. But the best thing to do, get out front, meet it head on, and you find that a lot of times a story can go away in 1 or 2 days that'll have 10 days worth of legs if you try to be too secretive.
Do you think that the way the campus reacted after their win affected the school and the players?
Meaning,
UConn, Monday night.
The wholeness.
oh, you mean the rioting and turning cars over? I don't think it affected the players. I mean, what that does, obviously, is it puts a negative spin at a time when the school is trying to ride a positive avalanche. Okay, it does. But at the same time, you got to that's part of the deal, and you got TV cameras there, and you can't start telling TV cameras you can't go here, you can't go there. Just let them do it. So, I mean, yeah, that was. Again, there is a case of trying to manage something that kind of puts a damper on what otherwise would have been nothing but positive for the school.
Can I just go?
Yeah, go ahead, Jack. Sure.
From a public relations standpoint, getting out in front of the story is the way to go. Bill Clinton was the master of that, and Dom hit on the important points. But I want to point out something that, from my standpoint, it's a little dangerous in that aspect. From my point of view, you got to be pretty sober and clever about how you go about that, because if you come out and try to jump out in front of the story and sort of bully the story, you're going to get some blowback.
What do you mean bully the story?
Jim Calhoun, for example, was an expert at saying, "Let me tell my story. I'm better at telling my story than you are." So if something came out, he would often try. he was very good at jumping out and trying to take control of the story. And
But did it work?
often it worked, sometimes it didn't. Because of, often there was holes in the way he told it. Truth and imagination are not one and the same. You know, so there are people that are very good at it, and there are people who aren't as good at that. But as from a public, I agree 100%. It's best to get out there. It's just like when if you did something wrong and you try to lie to your parents, and if they find out something, you know that it's going to drive them nuts. They're just going to keep on coming after you to the point where, like, you'll be in your room hiding, like, tweeting away, going, "I can't believe my parents are." Well, you know, try spilling more of the truth out early on. It generally works.
My thing would just be, don't get angry at us for trying to do our job. You know, if it's you want the cooperation of the media when it's a good story. When it's a bad story, we have to do our jobs, and we're not trying to hose anybody or make anybody look bad because of what we're reporting. The facts are the facts. And the idea that public relations people will get angry, nasty, I don't want to say vindictive, that's not the right word, but I'm thinking something in that vein, because a member of the media is reporting a negative story has always bewildered me. You can't have it both ways. You can't have, when everything's happy and joyful and the stories are all good, you can't be like, "Oh, that's wonderful," and when the story's bad, you can't be like, "What are you doing? Why are you reporting that?"
And I
That
can tell that your bosses will personalize it. Joe's got a huge point here. He doesn't like me. Next time there's a story, I'm just not giving it to him. You know, who gets the negative blowback from that? Not him. He'll get the story somewhere else. Sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to.
No, I was done. I was pretty much done.
Yeah.
So.
One thing I wanted to point out was, it's very interesting to me about exactly whose story, who gets control of the story from your guys' side of it. You're covering teams from at college. It's very structured. The college coach is tenured and powerful, and it's generally, if he's got a very strong program, like the UConn women, UConn men, football, in college football, there's cults of personality. So they basically tell the college presidents or the athletic directors and things how it's going to come down, and there's limited access to the students, the student athletes. So they're in control. So you're kind of answerable to them. At the professional level, there's powerful owners or GMs or so often the coaches are just beleaguered, and then you have these monstrous athlete personalities that are their own public relations, have their own public relations people and their own power. When I covered the Hartford Whalers, there was very few people that covered it, and it was a major league franchise, and the athletes would actually fight each other to get to me to, like, tell the story about how they wanted to frame, and they were, not insignificant stories, something, drunken driving or hiding an injury or whatever, and it just amazes, and I traveled with them and everything, and it just amazes me now, like something as big as the Yankees or the Red Sox. The stories are controlled often by a small cadre of players that cadre equally small cadres of certain journalists, so that what is represented as a full view of a team is often just a view of, like, a player or two talking to an inside journalist or two, and that passes off as the view of the Red Sox or the Yankees, and it's complete bullshit. There was something, you know what I mean? When you get that many people involved, and it's like Dom hit on the Schillings and the A-Rods of the world. They become their own public relations machines, and it's different. And all of a sudden, you have very mixed messages coming out from your side of it over exactly what the message is, who's in control, and that's a real battle for you.
I think the important thing is the relationships that you build. We both do basically the same thing. We both deal with people. We both need to know people. when you need the relationship isn't when UConn wins a national championship and goes 40-0. It's when a football player gets arrested for doing something really stupid and gets thrown off the team. You need to know, okay, well, this reporter, if he calls me or she calls me and I say something's off the record, I know it's off the record. Another person calls and says it's off the record and appears in the paper or on Twitter and within 13 seconds. So that's when you need to know who you're dealing with, and we need to know who we're dealing with, and the relationships are really the same on both ends. Has to be a sense of trust, and there has to be accountability, and I think that's why you need to develop relationships with people you would deal with, because when that hits the fan, you need to know the best way to proceed.
Social media has made your jobs a nightmare.
Yeah.
A living,
Yeah.
walking, talking nightmare. It's just, yes, Christopher? I get the name right? I didn't think she was, so.
I'm a male PR, so it doesn't seem like I have much of a shot from what you're saying.
No, we just, no, but come on, no, but see, you know what that
I
is?
said act more like them.
You know what but you know what that is?
And
That's your
less like-
typical college, that's your typical college
Snarky.
male, right, snarky, which we like, because we were all,
Yeah, very
trust
good,
me,
very
we were
good.
five
Keep going,
typically
Chris.
college
Very
snarky
good.
male.
We're
Just
very good.
blow ahead, Chris.
We still are.
So I was watching the Met game the other day, and Gary and Ron were talking about the Alan Craig shove. You guys see that when Alan Craig shoved the fan at the first?
Oh, yes, the Cardinals' first bat. Oh, wait, no, it was Matt. It wasn't Alan Craig. It was Matt Howell, the big first base. No, not
Oh,
Carpenter.
yeah, Matt Adams, yeah.
Matt Adams, right? That's it.
And he shoved the fan, and it was a small story, and it didn't really get a lot of press. It got it for a day or two, but I was kind of wondering that with today's social media and so many stories being released day to day, do you think that it's changed the influence a small story like that will have on a team? Or do you
Oh,
think that
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and not only does it change it after the fact. Last night is an example of driving it before the fact, because I was watching the Yankee Red Sox game, and people saw the goop on if anybody's familiar with that, the goop on the Yankee pitcher's hand. Now I'm following all the Yankee beat writers because I've known them all for years, and they're all basically saying, I don't know where this is coming from, but the Red Sox aren't complaining about it, the umpires aren't complaining about it. It's no big deal. But it took on a life of its own on Twitter during the course of the ball game, to the point that when the ball game was over, the traditional media had to make it the whole focus of the game. Had to make it the whole focus of the game, because they realized that that's what everybody was talking about. So social media very often, we have to do a lot of things that we don't want to do because of social media.
We saw this, Joe and I saw this during UConn's football search. They have these people that work for places called Football Scoop and Coaching Search, and they'll say, so-and-so is getting the UConn job, and then 38 seconds later, oh no, now so-and-so is getting a UConn job.
Yeah.
If they name enough names, eventually they're going to be,
Yeah, they're gonna be right.
So basically that's what they do. They just keep throwing names out there.
They
Go 1 for 30, but hey, and then after the fact,
You're
look
like weather people.
Look at us, we got it right. Well, yeah.
But the one thing that you really have to do, and it runs counter to human nature. In every job, every walk of life, there are certain elements of human nature that you have to find a way to shut off. For instance, in what we do, it's not in human nature to really be objective in anything, whether you're covering sports or politics or anything. But we have to shut that off and be objective. It's human nature to kind of focus on the negative things that people say about you, and forget the positive things. So what you deal with very often with athletes and coaches, even athletes and coaches who are almost universally revered and praised all the time, but yet they do what they essentially accuse the media of doing, which is focus on the 1% of negative things that are said about them, and forget the 99% positive. And two guys, I can give you an example that you'd be amazed. Derek Jeter thinks he's persecuted by the media, when in reality, we all know, 99% of what's said about him is positive. Most of us would kill to have as many nice things said about him as Derek Jeter does. But he'll concentrate on one, sentence in one story that might be a little bit snarky, and that's everybody's negative. And another guy, to be very honest with you, Kevin Ollie, has had absolutely nothing. He's well deserved, but he's had nothing but positive things said about him for 2 years, and yet he loves to play that card that everybody was negative, everybody was doubting, everybody I mean, when he was hired, he was a very popular choice. Very few people, if anybody, said, why did they hire him? And yet, when he won, it's like, well, people didn't think I could do the job, and people didn't, he does a lot of that. So you have to, and it's human nature. I mean, I get a lot of positive feedback for what I do, and the one negative tweet will get under my skin and bother me for a week. It's human nature. But as a PR guy, you have to kind of turn that off and remember the 99%, the vast majority of positive stuff that your client's getting. Remind him of that, and try to keep him or her off the 1% that's negative.
You never.
There's an art, and you guys that have never been on that side of the fence. I think is very powerful, and that's coaching the coaches or the owners, and reminding them exactly what Don said. Like, geez, be honest with them, saying like, you're getting killed here. It's like you see a lot of times in political movies and TVs, like the polls are showing this and whatnot. But if you got a sense that the guy's getting killed, then you got to say, like, look, you're getting killed on this. Be truthful with him. But in the other aspect of it, if he's getting 99% praise, remind him of that. Because, have a relationship with him and come on, you've been a little paranoid here because it's 99-1, we're winning. Don't focus on the one. And those are the type of interpersonal. I'm, like I said, not having been ever been part of that. I'm fascinated by the type of relationship the PR person has with his boss or who their representative, because you really, to me, it's like almost like a relationship with a husband or a wife or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You got to lay out the truth to them, or they got to know the truth and how they react to it. And you can have a soft conversation or a tough one, but it's like, what are we going to do here and how are we going to present it, and just remind them not to be paranoid. Dom's right. People are freaking paranoid, and it's just like one other point I wanted to make for you is about social media. I don't know if you guys know, there's a website called Deadspin.
Mm-hmm. I'm
right.
sure they know what that is.
All right. There's some hilarious stuff in there. Don't get me wrong. I've been on the receiving end of a couple of them over the years. It's not very hilarious, and it spreads like wildfire. Truth or not, and and that's where social media not only like Jimmy was talking about, like with the UConn football search, was just the last day was just. I've been in this business 30-odd years. It was the biggest nightmare I'd ever seen. The biggest nightmare. Guys were getting named and unnamed and bottom. It was a journalistic travesty. All right. Although they weren't really journalists, so let me just say it was a social media travesty. and it was the nightmare was for us. The travesty was for us. But you mix in the Deadspins of the world that not only are attacking fact, they're also attacking humanity. I guess humanity in one sense. So it's like it changes the world. I was there last night when Pineda had that thing, and I was following it, and it was like I wanted to do a Jacoby Ellsbury piece, coming back, and half of it ended up being about that stupid pine tar thing, because it takes control. It jumps inside of you and takes control of the story, and all of a sudden when you type it, you can't type about Jacoby Ellsbury anymore. It's like the power of that social media is just making you type Pineda, this pine tar and Pineda, P-I-N-E. It's like by the end of the day, Jacoby who? So my column was a mess. Because Michael Pineda had invaded in that time, and the social media had invaded and ruined my column on Jacoby.
Right, and just I don't know, and you got a question, but and the comments came from the Boston TV color analyst Jerry Remy. Well, 15 years ago, the only people who would have known about that would have been the people watching the game on Nesson. The people in New York wouldn't have known about it instantly, and it wouldn't have become a firestorm. Go ahead, Abe. And could you direct this to my man JW? Because with us four big mouths, he hasn't had a chance to open his mouth.
Yeah, that's
I'm like you guys. I'm just taking it all in.
You're new to Connecticut.
Yeah.
They talked about two-way communication, and obviously as an undergraduate coming out and going into public relations field, which I hope to do, specifically in soccer because I'm interested in it. The two-way communication's kind of it's not direct. I'm going to have someone above me saying if there is a crisis, someone's going to be down on me saying don't say a word. So I can't, obviously, it seems pretty clear you guys are saying tell the truth, we tell the truth, everything's going to be okay. But there's going to come a point where I'm going to have heads down with people in management that are saying, you know, don't tell these guys. So then how do I keep my credibility through you guys if
I have an answer for that. First of all,
Okay.
from what nation are you from?
I'm from Ireland?
Ireland, okay.
Right.
My name's Anya.
Yeah, I know. It was so thick, and I was like, guys.
If I don't see a
That's
pronunciation
bad.
thing,
I-
I'm in trouble.
I thought it was Tanzania.
I gave up on it.
Alright,
She
but-
knows I gave up.
But the reason I want to say that because I've covered some Olympics, a number of them over the years. In international media, if we think Deadspin's crazy, international media is off the charts.
Yeah.
I've seen people stand up at after events and the journalist is like, and sometimes over in other countries, the journalistic outlets are nothing more than arms of the actual government. So you don't even know, like, is it journalism? Is it geopolitical science? And the journalist like pounding. Are you aware that you are an outrage to your nation? I mean, how do you answer that, right? I mean, you're a PR person for that. Good luck, right? But
Yeah, they throw shoes too.
yeah, right. I mean, it's nuts. But I think my answer, my off the cuff, my first answer to you is be honest with me and say, look, they're gonna have my scalp if I give you anything. This is the one time I can't tell you anything.
Okay.
Or if you feel that I can tell you this, or I mean, just you gotta know yourself exactly how far you can go. But don't be afraid to say. But don't play that card like if next time around the last player on the team's got like a minor twisted ankle, I can't tell you. You lose all credibility. But if it's a big one, it's a big one. You know what I mean? And you go like, I can't tell you.
Yeah, and I've done that when I've had to do it. You know, because this is about preserving the relationship. What you don't want to do is keep them on the line. So I'll get back to you, and not. It's better not to promise if you can't deliver, and you're gonna take the consequence. They're not gonna be happy with you, but it preserves the relationship.
We'll be happier with it if you say, I can't comment
Right.
on that than if you lied to us.
Do you
That's
agree
the
though
bottom
that
line.
you agree that hiding the little stuff is just
It's
so
a-
counterproductive?
Yeah, what happens is that your bosses begin to love that, and so you have to say, look, we need to get this out and done, because it's not that big a deal. If we get into a position where every time he calls me, I say, I can't talk, he'll find another way to get the story. Your bosses believe that if you don't say anything, they won't run the story, which is baloney.
Right.
If you don't say anything, your side of the story doesn't get out there. It doesn't make the story go away.
And it's just human nature that if you tell us every time that you can't tell us anything, it's gonna indelibly hurt the relationship. Right? It's just, and there's a part, I don't wanna say all of us are vindictive, because we're not, that's not the truth. But if we keep hearing, I can't tell you, then your credibility's shot with us.
Yeah, you know, essentially what your role is to understand, and this is something that I think something like this could be very productive for you going forward, is to understand the media and understand how we operate and how we think well enough to be able to go to your boss and say, if you do this, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you say this, this is how it's going to, okay? And then once you've done that, your boss makes a decision and says, hey, look, I don't care, this is what we're going to do. Well, then you've done your job.
I call it the headline test.
Yeah.
You basically give them, this is gonna be the headline if we don't do something about it.
Right,
How comfortable are you with that?
right.
And you have different types of bosses. I have, especially when I covered the Hartford Whalers, there was lots of different owners, and I bring the Whalers up not just because it's me, but it was because it was a major league franchise that didn't have a whole lot of people covering it, so we had way more access than you would to like Dallas Cowboys, you know, unless Jerry Jones wants to. There was just a whole lot less filter, and I watched owners like change their opinions on a dime, and there you are trying to, you know, represent a truth to us, and like they're like changing left and right, and so I realize it has to be very difficult on your side of the fence to try and represent a truth when that truth is changing in their own mind. That's where I think there's guidance. I'm really big on this, is that, and I've seen this over the years, for the public relations person to have like a way with some really multi-billion people, they'll listen if they respect it.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing. You've got to build into the relationship with your bosses a credibility that you know what you're talking about. If they see you either as the fluff and stuff person, which frankly, a lot of people in sports PR are, if they think of you as just the happy talk person, or they don't treat you, or they don't realize that you're a professional, then when you get into those situations, they're not gonna listen to you. So it's all about making your own credibility with them, where you get to the point where you have to give them bad news, you tell them bad news.
The other thing about social media is you never know where it's coming from.
Oh, God.
I have a couple of examples. UConn and Notre Dame, they don't like each other. I know that's shocking to hear, but they don't. So they had an award ceremony. The Associated Press Player of the Year was from UConn, Coach of the Year was from Notre Dame, and they were in the same room. And I was shooting my little video that I'm supposed to shoot 1,000 a day, or however many I could shoot. And so where they stuck me, the only angle I had was Breonna Stewart walking by me, and the Notre Dame people were right there. And the whole time, the Notre Dame coach was like this, with the most sourpuss look. You would think that someone from UConn had just taken their dog and done countless
Don't go there.
nasty things there to him. And all of a sudden, 3 seconds of her. That's all it was. 3 seconds, and it went ballistic. And all of a sudden, I'm getting my stuff in the Boston Globe, Hartford Courant, the New London Day, and ESPN's getting ready to put that thing on the air. And it's because she sat here and she didn't clap. And you just sit there and think, wow. And the other thing that happened was last year I went to the White House for the UConn won the national title, so I get to meet the President of the United States. A lot of great stuff came out of it.
Did you take a selfie with him?
No. The most important thing that happened there was Stephanie Dolson and Kia Stokes put their fingers behind the President of the United States for bunny ears. And that was the only, when I got on the train to go back home, I thought my phone was going to explode into 1,000 pieces, because we have to have something on, this is like, oh, I didn't know they even did it. And those were the two, it's so you're never prepared. Maybe at our age, you just don't know where these things come from and what makes a social media extravaganza.
I don't think the PR people know how to control at this point either. I think it's a wild, wild west for everybody involved.
Right, yep.
Because the White House just had a set to a Samsung. When Ortiz took that photo, he claimed that he wasn't doing it for personal gain, but Samsung, who he has the deal with, threw it out there immediately. And now the White House is saying that no more selfies. The Olympians were just there. And so that was a complete social media concoction in with corporate people. I mean, it was just, that stuff I don't even know how you begin to control it.
Would you tell us a little bit about how social media has changed?
Anthony had a question right here.
Yeah.
Just from like what you guys are talking about, I see a trend that's going on about this influx of social media and the impact it's had. Looking at where we were 10 years ago, how far it's come in just 10 years, what do you think it's going to be like 20 years from now?
Worse.
When I'm 40 years old and I'm in my profession, and is it just going to keep growing, or is it going to be a fad and it's going to?
Well, I think a lot of that depends as to what new platforms are there going to be for. Because first there was Facebook, right? Then there was MySpace, which has died. Now Twitter is all the rage. You don't know what the platforms are going to be in 10 or 20 years. So I think it's a great question, but I think it's an impossible question. I think the more advanced the platforms become, then I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger. Because at some point we're going to all retire. Well, Jeff won't, but the rest of us will. At some point we'll all retire, and then people your age, a lot younger than us, will be the elder statesmen of these type of discussions and events. And you're going to have experience in all these things. I mean, it's going to be all fresh for you. So I think it's a great question, but I would guess it's a question that we probably can't. I think it'll get bigger before it gets before
Yeah.
it gets
It
smaller.
doesn't exist yet.
Right, yes.
But I think it'll level off, because I think as new generations, as you all get older, and then the next wave of kids your age come along, one of the generations in the future, one of the waves of kids are going to say, how do you live your life like that, looking at the phone every second of every day? Do you need to know? I mean, you can't wait 10 minutes to turn on a car radio or whatever. I think at some point it's going to reach that saturation point where it's going to be, you know what, we got to back off as a society. We got to back off with this, because no one's talking to each other. No one's paying attention. You know, no one's watching where they're walking. No one's watching where they're driving.
that now.
Everybody's
Yeah.
in their phone. I think that's gonna. I think that's gonna level off.
Well, it's funny because people, like kids ask me, what was the biggest difference from when you were a kid to they were? And like when at my age, my parents, they actually had things that were really different. Cars, and they didn't have cars, and have televisions and all that sort of stuff. The only difference that I remember when I was your age is that people now on campus, they walk around like this. That's the only difference I can really think of from when I was your age.
Yeah.
Let's see, drunk, stupid, impulsive, check, but at least we were walking like we didn't get hit by a car.
You couldn't see straight, but you could walk straight.
Bingo.
Lady in the back?
We talked a lot about like negative things about social media. Do you think that social media, like Twitter and stuff, has brought any positive things?
No.
Tom, you are
No,
stuck
no,
on that.
It doesn't give us. It's one thing that like if you.
I'm just kidding.
There's no more scoops except for like if you actually get a scoop and you actually can tweet it out like 13 seconds in front of somebody else. So I mean, I think there's some information. I'm not 100%. I kind of like Twitter.
Yeah, I do too.
You know what I mean?
I'm on it all the
Because
time.
If you give accurate information right away, it's terrific. The first one to pass the gossip that's truth and not fiction, man, that's a powerful thing.
That's where I get my news. Like I go on Twitter in the morning. And that's
Yeah, but it's all mixed in. We don't know,
Well-
right? Some of it's news and some of it's
Yeah.
fiction. Right?
But and the other thing,
couple of
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
like when you like I follow more than like one newspaper, so when they have the same story, I kind of think it's true. So
Right.
That's
The,
when I go off.
the worst thing that ever happened to Twitter is people who have enough time to be not Jim Calhoun or not Tom Moore or fake Rand Pecknall. Not that Tom and Rand have, although Tom should. But those people are the people who should have their fingers broken and who should never be allowed on Twitter again. Because that's just the stupidest thing. If you have enough time to do that, you should probably do something
At
else.
least be funny.
Yeah, at least be funny. But I think I love Twitter. I think that the idea, like when we were at the Final Four, or when we're all at the Final Four, you can take pictures and put them out there, and people can see stuff that they might not see,
Yeah.
until
That's-
the broadcast TV comes on. Like when the UConn men walked in every night, I had to be there waiting because I had to go in and talk to Coach Ollie for his pregame interview. So I always would tweet a picture. We'd get like 25 retweets and stuff, and people were looking at it and stuff. I think the positive of Twitter far outweighs the negative. Far outweighs the negative.
Yeah, question two.
Yeah, I think it's come to a point, whether you look at it as a journalist's perspective or PR, people just love reporting their own news and their own opinions, and I think that news now is starting to become a kind of like it's very mixed, especially through social media. People just kind of throw their own views upon there, and it travels if it's interesting enough, or if it grabs people's attention, or it's funny, it travels, and I think that is probably one of the most dangerous facts of social media.
You know something that hasn't been brought up here in more than an hour, and it's totally fascinating to me. The sports information people and PR people are now, much of their time is spent on reporting.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are like sitting right next to us, sending out pictures and sending out stories, and it's hard for us to get a hold of you. Wait a minute, I'm too busy sending out my own story.
We're self-publishing.
Self-publishing. And it's funny because Michael Enright, who was a terrific guy, had at SID at UConn, and he's very level-headed. I found him, and very few times I've ever butted head on him. The one time he was critical of me was at the beginning of a year. UConn was playing in a bowl game, and it was like, I can't remember if they were number one playing a basketball game, and I wrote a column about how, it was January 1st, about how universities are now, the future is that they're going to, you know, have their own, and he had spoken at an Associated Press convention about how universities are now going to tell their own story in a lot of ways. And my point was that it was a January 1st newspaper, and I was trying to use that date as telling us what the future is. So you guys are now, it's amazing to me, like, it's like, it used to be the newspaper guy was like, a PR person would come over and go like, hey, I have to give you a little fact, not now, I'm on deadline, blah, 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 I can't talk, give it to me in the next edition. Now, you go over to them and they go, can't talk, I'm writing for that, and it's a little, I don't know who's serving who. So we're in competition with PR people ostensibly telling the truth. So now, and that, you asked that question, that was the one I wanted to answer about what the future is. That's one of the futures. And also, I mean, whatever is the most vain, narcissistic thing, that's the future. That part I know. I don't know anything else, but I know that one.
Well, the reality is that's part of our job now. It's called owned media.
Owned media.
Yeah, when we get you guys to talk about our clients, it's earned media. We earn enough respect from you, or enough content, give you enough content that you write. But this is owned media, and this is part of our job now.
I like earned media a lot.
Yeah. Let me give you a piece of advice when you all get jobs in public relations. When you see a sports writer on deadline, it better be the most important thing in the world, because there's not a crabbier group of people on planet Earth, and these three guys know exactly what I'm talking about, than sports guys on deadlines. And if you don't have the most utmost important information to give them, steer clear.
Or a chocolate chip cookie.
Right, or a cookie or a soda. Yes, young lady.
Since you touched upon the earned media and paid media, I just wanted to ask, like, where do you see the future for paid media? Because with on Twitter and like social media and the internet, like something that there is paid
Advertising.
Oh, pay, oh, well.
That's the third. It's
Well,
paid
Like after
media.
I graduate, I'm going into the advertising industry, so they've been talking about like where is advertising gonna go now that there's social media and media out there that it's not really that much of a need. Do you guys agree or?
Dominic, we talk about all the
Yeah.
time about you know, financing our website versus.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
could go on forever
you know,
about this.
one of the problems with advertising is that they don't know where to go. They don't know. I mean, print newspaper advertising is actually more effective, but it reaches fewer and fewer people. Internet advertising reaches a lot of people. It's not very effective. TV I think is probably still what more or less what it's always been. But the thing is, the internet is advertising. You know what I mean? Your website is your front porch. That's your advertising. So do you need to buy a paper, buy an ad somewhere? Advertising doesn't really know where to go. I mean, there's a lot of talk about newspapers and what we've been going through the last 8 or 9 years, and it's true. But almost anything that involves communication, or a pen, anything, or pencil and paper, or print, or anything that involves a physical hard copy, is hurting. And advertising is something that they don't really know where to go, where to put their money that's best, and that's going to shake out over time. But how it's going to shake out, I'm at a loss to figure it out.
Display advertising in newspapers is so much more expensive than the internet, and we're not. We've just failed to, whether they're going to have to pay for the sites eventually. The biggest problem from our standpoint is we let the cat out of the bag like 15 years ago and gave away our information for free.
Right.
And while we're charging people for newspapers, whoever thought of that is all-time hall of shame on our side of it. So, probably really rich and retired right now, but
Yeah.
just all-time hall of shame. How monetizing the internet for us online is what's going to keep us alive. And now you call up our stories. I mean, call up Dom's story, and there's like advertising around it. I'm sure that he's not endorsing. I mean, some of it's, my columns, I'm going like, I have nothing to do with endorsing that, but somebody that I'm working for has endorsed, and almost, that kind of shakes me a little bit. But that's where how much money we can get off from the internet, or charging it for you to buy that site is what's gonna, it has to shake it. It hasn't nearly fully shaken out yet.
I think in radio, it's really starting to take effect too now, because everything is like radio.com or iHeartRadio, and at our radio station, which is the biggest in the state, they're almost more concerned about digital advertising than they are what we put on the air. And it's like, well, we'd like to have some commercials on the radio too, and TV's not as much. There's not even, but the TV websites are crazy now, because we've got digital people who will remain unnamed, except it's on YouTube, so he'll know who it is. That they, and you can edit that part out. In that they'll tell you, well, make sure you post your story to the web. Well, let me do the story first. Let me get it finished so that it's on the air, or let me make sure it's as good as it can be before we have to put it on the website. Radio and TV, electronic media is starting to push heavily towards the website. They'll always be there, and I think newspapers will always be there in some sort. This whole thing that 15 years from now, newspapers will be dead. I don't, as somebody who's read it for all 40 years that I've been alive, they'll always be there. Radio and television will always be there, but there's a big push towards digital. We have our salespeople have a meeting every week for 2 hours for digital. Well, don't you think we'd be better spent going out and getting ads for the radio?
Sure.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Lady in white.
So I know that blogs are becoming a lot more a part of like people, especially our age's everyday life. Like for me, that's where I go with my sports information. I either follow my team directly, or if there's like one specific.
Who's your team, first off?
The Red Sox. All Boston. Sorry.
You have to apologize to me.
Sorry.
That's all right.
So how do you guys feel about like blogs and how they're coming on the scene and sort of overshadowing a lot of traditional media sources in terms of?
These two guys have two of the best blogs in the state
You know what?
newspapers.
Blogs are already like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
To be honest, Twitter has kind of replaced blogs. Blogs on newspaper sites are a little bit different because we have our regular stories also on the website. So it's almost like a blog within a blog. The kind of blogs I think that you're talking about, the independent blogs, they're actually pulling stuff from newspapers and aggregating it and putting it together. So if you're a fan of that team, it's all there for you from one. Of course, there's also a lot of opinion there, and some of it can be amateurish. But to give you an example of the impact that blogs still have or can have, Deadspin did a thing last year where they ranked the beat writers of all the major league teams, and when they ranked the Yankees beat writers, a guy who is okay, but he does a nice job on a lot of different things. He's a decent writer, but never really breaks any stories. But he does the best job of having a blog that pulls everybody else's stories, aggregates everybody else's stories on the beat into that one place. And he was voted by Deadspin's people the best beat writer, whereas the two guys who do far and away the best job of ferreting out news, digging for news, getting news out there, one of them was last, and one of them wasn't even mentioned. So very often with blogging, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not huge on the blog, is just the idea of aggregating stuff from other places. Blogs do a very good job of organizing and moderating discussion about a team, as opposed to actually being the first place to get news. But it's very impactful.
I personally have a little different my blog, I'm on YouTube, so I'm not going to say anything about what I put more emphasis on, because I would like to keep my job. But the fact of the matter is you have room for one story in your paper, and you're going to have a lot more information if you're doing your job right than 15 inches of stuff. So you can go and you can get stuff in your blog that will never make the paper. And what we've gotten to do is I'll tell my office, hey, I got this blog, and they'll put a little promo to read the blog about this. So I think that it's very beneficial for me to get some stuff out. Just for that reason, you can put videos up there. I I think that's becoming the way to go. The issue I have is people who do a blog and they do a story and it's the same thing. I don't really get that exactly. I don't really understand the purpose of that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of going off of this whole idea of social media and it taking away, or advertising taking away from kind of what it used to be. How frustrating, not even positive or negative, but how frustrating it is for you all when you're sitting in a press conference and all your key parts to the story are being tweeted as you're kind of like gathering the information. Because, I mean, I've sat in on a few press conferences recently and I'm updating Twitter on my phone and all the key points pop up and then the article comes out and I'm like, oh, do I even need to read it? So like, how frustrating is that for you guys?
Yeah, see, that's what, as an old school guy, that's one of the things that bothers me, is because, and you know, the company compels me to tweet, and they want you to do exactly that, and I do it, be at a press conference and tweet all the quotes out and tweet all the points out. And like you, I'm thinking, well, you know what, we're giving the product away for free, and we're not giving people any reason to, you know, I'd rather maybe tweet one or two things out to tease it, and then tweet out the link to the story that has the whole thing. But unfortunately, that's one of many awkward elements that we have not really found a way to do it right without cutting our own throats. Because I think very often we cut our own. Cutting our own throats is too strong, but we hurt ourselves on Twitter.
We have Twitter classes at our paper.
Do you really?
Yes, about the best. And I thought the person made a great point that it's not important to tweet often, it's important to tweet well. And so we'll be at a game.
What's the definition of tweeting well?
Well, at a game, you know, guys will go in first TV timeout. UConn's 8 of 11 and has 6 rebounds. And second TV timeout, UConn's 12 of. Well, anyone that's watching the game, you know, knows that Breanna Stewart has 22 points and 8 rebounds.
And so we're told to tweet off, and they don't care what it is.
So what we try to do is we try to treat trends during the game. That they just did this defense to stop this player from scoring, instead of just putting stuff out there that the game's on TV. Honestly, do I need to tweet that Breanna Stewart's a very good player? I don't know that. Anyone that's following me on Twitter, chances they follow UConn women's basketball. What's the point of that?
So adding to the conversation something you couldn't get anywhere else is a good tweet.
Yeah. I just want to say I think probably the best thing, and you guys hit on it before, is tweet stuff that people can't see. The UConn maybe guys warming up in the hallway, or I remember we were in Lincoln covering the regionals, and Sweet Caroline came on the PA system, and the UConn fans knew what to do, and the rest of the people had no idea what to do. And I kind of thought that was funny. It's something that didn't make TV, and I don't tweet a lot, but I agree with you, Jim. I think it's quality over quantity. And so that was one thing I put out there is, hey, this is kind of funny that, here in New England, we all know Sweet Caroline, even the Yankee fans understand it. And then out there in Nebraska, they're, what the heck is this? So, I mean, those are the type of things I think you probably should be tweeting out. Not the obvious things, as you mentioned, but the stuff that you can't normally see, that behind-the-scenes access.
I think tweeting is at the forefront. Every action has a reaction. I think tweeting is right now at the forefront of changing everything we do, because these guys are the guys who are news gatherers are now tweeting out, like I said, the information immediately. Okay, so many of these guys now feel a compunction to try and not report the facts or story. They then spin those facts, and I read what I would classically call game stories or features less, but reporting is now analysis on blogs, like you were talking about, and in the stories by the beat people. Now, I want to say this with all due respect, because I 20 years as a beat person, 20 years as a columnist. The beat people now have lost a lot of their objectivity, in my view, by they feel that they've told the facts, tweeted or blogged immediately, and now using blogs and their own reporting to give their view of things. So they become disproportionately powerful in terms of how they want to spin things. And journalistically, I do not like that, because I think there's someone in the room has to be clean.
He didn't do this
someone in the room has to be clean, because the PR person, he or she isn't clean. The columnist, he or she, in terms of objectivity, isn't clean. I want that beat person to be as clean as possible. And that person isn't as clean as they used to be 20 years now. And I see it as a that's not a PR person problem per se, it's a journalism problem. It's also putting the general columnists out of business. Now, I'm going to be gone in 5-10 years anyway, so it's not, don't take this as like, I'm going to be gone in 2 years. Don't take this as like me trying to feather my own. But the general columnist has one overriding worth, and that is he or she is not beholden not only to the team they're covering, but to the sport they're covering. So many beat people become powerful voices for the industry of basketball, the industry of baseball. And general columnists are, their only clean part is that they're supposed to call a spade no matter what. And that all started, to me, it all starts with that tweet that came out, is that robbed that person of their job. And so what happens at the column at the end, that somebody may take a more sober view of it, now is feeling pressure to like, to go to the most tabloid opinion possible, just to be noticed.
Do your employers require you to engage in social media, and if so, how much and how often? Dom, it sounds like the
Yeah.
answer for you is yes.
We're required to do it, and we have like a quota. We have to tweet a certain number of times a day. So we have a quota to meet, and I know
We had a
that.
panel here from ESPN. And
Yeah.
we were talking
So
about
yeah.
Don't you hate that we're talking about social media here? I'm ready to go home.
No, please
No,
don't.
honest to God, I'm ready to go home.
Stay.
It's all about public relations, and we're talking about it. My disdain for it is so great that I can't even stand being
Stay right here. Stay right here.
I have a non-social media question.
Good
Yeah.
job.
So this is something that I've talked about in another one of my classes. It's the use of the term the Redskins in like writing, and how people avoid using that term. How do you guys as journalists feel about that? Do you think that's unprofessional because they're being unobjective?
It's the name of the team. Until
Yeah.
they change the name of the team, I think that's what you gotta call it. No, to me, I've never really thought twice about it. I don't know if that makes me a bad person or not, but until they actually change the name of the team legally, I don't have a problem calling them because that's their name. That's how you report on it.
You know what I think? If in a case like that, if you have a real problem with it, if you really object to it, I think you could write a piece that explains that, and then go forward simply calling them Washington, so that people understand where you're coming from, why you feel the way you do. That's on the record, and then you just avoid it.
But I mean,
What you don't want to do though is make a political statement in every single game story, in every story, regardless of what it's about. But you want to just call them. A lot of us, when stadiums took on the names of companies, a lot of us thought that was free advertising. Would try to get away from it, and the stadium formerly known as Comiskey became a popular way of doing it. But I think but that would be one way of handling it. That remains where you're allowed to be who you are, and be true to what you believe in, without kind of being a little bit overbearing with it.
Well, I think for the people who work for the Redskins, who are the PR people, it's a nightmare because it's discussed more almost than
Than the team.
Robert Griffin III's ankle or who they're drafting or any of that. I agree with J-Dub that it's the team name and you have to report it, but it doesn't make you comfortable doing it. The University of North Dakota nickname was the Fighting Sioux, and they had that taken. The outcry was so strong that they knocked the nickname off. But now, because of, I think it's the governor or some state law or something like that, the university doesn't have a nickname until 2015. I mean, that doesn't make. I mean, that makes no sense to me either. It's just. But I think to spin it into the PR standpoint, I think for the PR staff of the Redskins, It's a nightmare. And what makes it even harder is because the owner is so staunchly against changing the nickname. You know, I mean, he doesn't appear to see anything wrong with it. And just because it's been that way for 70 years doesn't make it right.
Let's go off this idea that we should get back to PR. One of the things we need to do is very easy when you're doing PR for UConn men's basketball to go, look at these numbers, look at these victories. Talk to us about us placing the small stories, because that's really where we earn our stripes, is the stories that are the personal stories, I think.
Well, I think it goes back to your original question from an hour ago, whenever it was, is what can PR people do to help us? And that's, we're always looking for good stories, good feature stories, and you have columns you gotta write pretty much every day. You know, you can always use help, and you're always looking for stuff on the beat, and same with Dom, and certainly in television, we're always looking for great feature stories that resonate with viewers statewide. I'll give you a good example. Mike Kobolansky is the SID down at Southern Connecticut, just down the road here. Division II school, great basketball program, nationally ranked this year. So, you know, he was looking for some pub for his school because, you know, we're so UConn centric, which, you know, understandably so. They're, for lack of a better term, our pro team. So he says, hey, look, you know, they're, you know, we got a great team this year, a lot of local kids. And I'm talking to him like, well, that's great, but there's got to be a better story than just we're good. You know, and that's great and everything, but how about something a little bit deeper than that? So he thought about it, he called me back, he said, all right, I got a good angle for it. We got two kids whose basketball roots run very deep. We got a kid by the name of Tylon Smith, whose family's roots in Connecticut basketball history are very deep. His grandfather is the coach at Windsor High School. They just won their 4th state title last month. His dad's been involved with playing and coaching, his uncles, his cousins, so on and so forth. We have another kid who's not from Connecticut. His name's Luke Houston. He's from Pearl River, New York. His dad, Kevin, played at Army, was the leading scorer in the nation in 1987. He played with and against David Robinson, not only in college, but with him in the service, the Army and the Navy, when they would get together and play. Luke's grandfather, Jerry, played under Joe Lapchick at St. John's and won an NIT in 1956. So those are great stories that now I was sold. I'm like, well, great. Now we can tell the story of the Southern Connecticut Owls being a great nationally ranked Division II team that's going to go far in the postseason.
Brought it down to human.
But you brought it down to human. Like, wow, these are great kids with great basketball roots, and they had fun stories to tell. And I think that's what we're looking for. So what I would tell you guys, in addition to, hey, you know, be honest with us, you know, help us out on game day with logistics, you know, get us people that we need to talk to when we're on deadline, you know, all those things. The number one thing I would tell us is, feed us these feature stories, you know, because we need it. We need it a lot more than you think we need it.
Yeah, I'll give you, you know, one example of that was UConn baseball last year. They won the Big East tournament. They're going to the NCAA. And my boss was on the fence about whether or not to send me on the road to Virginia Tech to cover them, which I wanted to do because I love baseball. I wanted to go. And I had been talking to the coach at the selection show, and he had told me that, he said, you know, to be honest with you, I wasn't expecting us to go this far, and I made arrangements. I'm going to get tested to donate part of my liver to one of my former teammates who needs a liver donation. He was going to do live donor. And I said, well, you know what? I said, keep that under your hat. I said, and when, you know, down the road when you're ready to talk about it, you know, we'll talk about it. So I'm on the phone with my boss, and he goes, well, you know, I'm trying to pitch it. I'm trying to get them to send you. He goes, but we're going to need something for A1. You know, we're going to need something for the front page of the paper. He goes, you have any ideas? And I said, well, here's one. I said, you know, the coach may donate part of his liver to his former teammate on Thursday. Silence on the phone. He goes, book the flight. So when you do have a human interest story of that you can tell, and we've seen here at Quinnipiac, at the Courant, when we do stories on Quinnipiac or Central Connecticut or even the New Britain Rockcats, it's going to be on something that's a little bit it's going to be a feature story. And one of those that runs on the cover is far more advantageous than us writing little blurbs about the game day and, you know, every game. So you always want to come up with those big, knock it out of the park feature stories. That's what's going to attract. That's how you're going to get the smaller school, the high school, that's how you get that stuff in the paper.
I was just gonna ask, kind of, I know we talked about, you all said, like, don't let PR people be bossy, but how important is it when feature stories come around to kind of trust those PR people? Because they know their client obviously the best, and kind of, I also experienced like a feature story interview this past week, and the PR person and the interviewee for the news had completely different ideas on where they wanted the story to go. And I will tell you right now, they came in saying, okay, this will be an hour interview. It turned into 3 hours because it was 2 hours of the news station and the PR person arguing over where the feature story should go. So how important is it for you guys to kind of trust that the PR person knows their client, kind of knows where this story is going to go? And do you think it's kind of beneficial sometimes to compromise and really just trust them on that, and to build that relationship?
Bottom line is, when it comes time to do the interview, we're gonna do the best story. It really doesn't matter one bit what the PR person wants the story to be.
Okay.
And that's really what, I'll give you an example. The pro tennis tournament used to have ATP, men's tour, and women's tour. So we don't do a lot of tennis during the year. I follow it a lot, but, so you go up to the PR person, you go to ATP who do the men, and they'll tell me about this kid's background, how they got started playing tennis. You go to the WTA person, well, they've won 6 tournaments this year and they're ranked 11th in the world, and you're like, wow, yeah, that's great stuff. It's like that's the difference. And they're in the same profession, but the one of them get it. One of them get that we're looking for something that people want to read, and the others are just like, stop bothering me, type thing.
I noticed, I didn't do a lot of sports PR, but when I did, and I came in contact with a lot of PR people from specific teams, I was struck by how lazy they were. You guys are PR majors, we're used to working our buns off for stories. They waited for the writers to come to them, and it shocked me.
That's not encouraging.
No, and that's what I want to get to you guys, is that just because you're working even for a winning team, you still have to work your buns off. You can't just expect all they have to do is win, and these guys will come running to your door.
And don't take it personally if you pitch an idea and I say no. Come back to me. The next one, it might be something that we're looking to do, and it's, I would say pitch as many ideas, but also, like I said earlier, know who you're pitching to, and if it's something that they might be interested in.
Just because Jim doesn't like it doesn't mean it's not a good
Yeah,
idea.
so if I like it, it's a
what I'm
great
saying?
story.
It might be, you might be able to take that same idea to another.
Right, well, that's what I
another-
noticed, the bigger news station kind of followed what they originally wanted to do, whereas the local news station kind of followed more what the PR team was looking for. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I know you guys were talking about it, like the different stations.
That's why our job is to give them the stuff to work with, not to control the story, but to give them enough to intrigue them to say, this moves me.
I am absolutely stunned that the voluminous emails I get from smaller colleges or from the big school, from the smaller sports, yet no one approaches me about an idea that you're talking about. It's amazing to me. I mean,
But I'm not sure I understand. I mean,
okay,
they-
Trinity, say they have a really good story idea. The next one I get from Trinity College about, hey Jeff, will be the first one. and they're not alone. And even at UConn, so much of it is about either, like I said, it's either trying to go to like relying on victories, or relying on, I can put it in my alumni magazine, or I can things that raise the most money, like basketball or football, and all of a sudden there's somebody on a lacrosse team and they won't come to you. It's amazing. There's great stories out there. How can you people who know these things sit there and expect someone on this panel to automatically know about that special story? And that's somebody's son, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's brother, somebody's sister. And you're not going to push that story? You're right. It's like somebody's lazy.
And then you get complaints from the alumni.
You're right.
You don't cover my team.
Right.
We got a letter to the TV station from some guy from Central who was annoyed by an elderly gentleman who was annoyed that we didn't do enough with Central, and he mentioned, this and that, and then he ruined the letter at the end by saying you should come down to Stanley Golf Course and interview a Central golfer. Well, unfortunately, time would prohibit us from doing that. But that's the thing that and Central, Tom Pinson's there does a terrific job of getting the word out about his athletes and stuff. But I'm just saying, to use Jeff's example with Trinity, that's a group that feels because their football program is so good and their baseball program has been good and their squash program has been nationally ranked that they don't have to tell you anything about the other athletes. And we can't, in our business, because we have so many things to do, we can't know everything about every athlete. It's just impossible. And when you go to work for an organization, a school, a company, whoever you go to work for, if something piques your interest, the odds are it's going to pique our interest, and it would make a story. And again, if it doesn't work for Jeff, you go to JW. If it doesn't work for JW, you go to exhaust your potential people to talk to. Yes, Chris. It's not another Mets story, is it? Because that was kind of okay. Were you watching the Mets intentionally, or did somebody force you to do that? Okay, all right.
We've already insulted about the Mets and
I know.
forced them out of the business.
And this is on YouTube, thank you very much.
I feel like Quinnipiac has a lot of that, like they kind of talk about the hockey and basketball team here a lot, but other sports and athletes don't really get a lot of coverage. And I always thought that they did that because, say like the baseball, lacrosse, or tennis teams don't really bring in revenue. Do you think that has an effect on the way?
Yes, 100%. I might have dissed you on the Mets, but you're 1,000% right on that. That those sports are called quote Olympic sports. Basketball and football are referred to in the college lexicon as separate entities, but everything else, soccer, football, soccer, hockey, everything falls into the term Olympic sports. And I think schools want publicity on all their sports, but they feel for some reason that it's imperative that the major sports get more of the publicity. If schools, if somebody came to us at Channel, like if Trinity came to us at Channel 30 and said, we've got a kid whose grandfather played for the 1919, White Sox who threw the World Series, we'd be out there, in a heartbeat, provided we could get a camera.
Yeah.
It's never overseas.
Part of that is, part of that's Quinnipiac too, because remember they emailed us once that we have a cross country team with three triplets on the team, and I was like, hey, I'd love to do that story. So within a week, I was over at Quinnipiac interviewing those three girls. I had a great time doing it. I wouldn't have known that if I believe it was.
That's the PR person.
Now, who reached out to you, Jim?
I think it was Ken.
Right.
And because with us, we obviously do a little bit more at Quinnipiac than, because it's right in our backyard. So we'll do a soccer, we'll do a field hockey or whatever, and we'll end up. But we need to know that because obviously we know what's going on. You see women's basketball, UConn, or men's basketball. They're on television all the time. I'm not too up on what's going on with the field hockey program at Quinnipiac, even though I know their coach is a sweetheart person. I've dealt with her. But I don't know the basis of, okay, this is going to be a great story, and that's where the school, again, if that's where people here are going into, SID work, then that is a very important part to throw us personality pieces for us to look at doing.
There's also a misnomer that the media doesn't want to do positive stories, that we're all about doing negative stories. That's
one of the single worst misrepresentation.
Yes, absolutely, Jake. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. If there's a story out there that's, just for an example, there was a player from Michigan State basketball named Adrian Payne who became friendly and knew about an 8-year-old girl named Lacey who had cancer. And that was an amazing story when that came out. And then, unfortunately, Lacey just passed away about a week or so ago. And everybody who heard that story or knew that story was heartbroken. And it doesn't have to be kid with cancer. I mean, I do a lot of stuff with Make-A-Wish, so I'm very in tune with that. But it can be anything. But good news, in fact, in the world that we live in, good news is so much more appreciated now than say what went on at my radio station last
Yeah,
week.
I agree with Joe, and I've never, as a PR person, gone on the premise that that's what they focus on. They're going to do the negative stuff. It's our job to bring them the positive stories. So I think what I'd like to do is, if you guys have any other questions, or then I'm gonna ask my last one.
Just, how do you manage the relationships you build with the players and telling the story? You said you, with Shabazz, you guys talk. How do you manage like a bad story coming out and then actually telling it without ruining your relationship with them?
Well, I mean, in his case, I think he's easy because he gets it. I think he understands. I don't know if you probably.
He's media savvy.
Yeah,
is what he is.
I mean, but he's also very smart and very curious. Like he asks questions, learns about our job, and understands what we do. So he's very easy on that front. What you have to learn how to do as a beat writer, particularly because you are around them all the time, is understand the just the factor of risk versus reward. If you're going to burn a bridge, or you're going to burn a bridge for something that's really not that big a deal, or you're going to burn a bridge for something that is a big deal, and you have to make that judgment. Is this going to be on YouTube? Is this going to be?
You can.
Did you sign the release?
You can refuse to, but he was late. He didn't.
But I'll give you an example.
Why don't you just not use names?
So if it's disguise your face, I won't want you.
We had a beat writer who covered pro team at one point, and he was obsessed with kind of getting noticed. And he would go to spring training, and he would bait.
Wait a minute, Jake's right here. Do you want to tell this?
sorry,
Oh,
sorry,
okay. I'm
sorry.
sorry. Oh, he laughed. Good. And he can't get back in the room. So this is doubly good.
Yeah.
Jake, come on in. He's telling a story about you, but he's not using your name.
No, but we're talking about relationships with the people that you cover. Well, anyway, this writer had found a couple of people on this team that he covered that he could bait into saying stupid things about the commissioner of baseball.
No, I know.
About the manager. And yeah, because you know who this is.
I do.
Yeah, and so a couple of times in spring training, he got these people to say foolish things, ran with it, and he got noticed. We got noticed on ESPN for having gotten these quotes. Well, by the end of spring training, however, all of the other players on the team would not talk to him. These two players got onto him, and they wouldn't talk to him. The manager would not talk to him. The general manager wouldn't talk to him. And, and essentially, he was out of business. Even to do the regular day-to-day stuff, he was out of business. And not only that, but when he went on to another beat the next year, that manager happened to know the guy that he was going to cover, called him up and said, you're getting the worst, So, I mean, the point being, for stories that had very little lasting value, this guy just burned all his bridges. And that's wrong to do that. That's counterproductive. So what you do is you have to make a choice. Sometimes a story is so big and so important that you have to do it. You burn the bridges that have to be burned. Even if it's the coach, even if it's the GM, if it's that big a deal. But you have to sometimes ask yourself, do I want to make the short-term splash and hurt myself down the road? That's where you have to, not necessarily. So the point is, you don't want to be petty. You want to think big picture, think on a big scale. When you're doing a beat that's important.
Tom, don't you agree that none of you guys should get in the business if you hate the media?
Right.
Right.
I mean traditional media. I don't even know what the word media means anymore.
Right,
But
right.
if you hate the traditional media, leave right now.
Yeah.
Do yourself a
Yeah.
favor. Do everybody a favor.
Including your client.
Right.
Yeah, because there is one person that I've worked with over the years who I was convinced hated the media. I don't know why he got involved in it, and he did. And one time, I told him that when he confronted me on something. I said, "I think you just hate the media." He had a great response though. I don't hate the media. I just hate you, which I do. He was lying, but it was a great lie. But I just think I don't know how much they teach you guys in PR about just interpersonal relationships, because you're all young here. But like talk to your dad. like, you know, like learn how to talk to a 55-year-old or 50-year-old guy. Talk to your mom. Learn how to talk to a 45, 50-year-old woman. Talk to your, talk to your brother that's your own age, or your friends. Don't just be stuck in one little circle of how you talk to. You guys have to talk to a lot of different people. Black, white, Catholic, Jew, old, young, and it really would behoove you guys to bond on a human level. It's just that's an observation I've had over 30 years because we're going to be crotchety. You guarantee it. Joe's right. Sports writer on deadline, worst person alive. Sports writer, 1 o'clock, eating free food at an NFL game, nicest person alive.
But Jeff, to answer your question, you have to manage relationships as well as you manage your job, and also gauge some people understand, and some people don't, and you have navigating the personalities that you cover is very important. Navigating Kevin Ollie's personality very different from his predecessor.
No
but you have to
line.
navigate
You
that.
gotta know it. You gotta know what the line is to be close with the players, but you don't want to. There are people that go too close, and are they your best friend? Are you trying to be their uncle, or are you trying to cover the team?
Yeah, that's
because when
right.
time comes for you to lower the boom, they're gonna be, wow, where'd that come from? I thought we were buddies.
And most of us cover college sports teams, and there's such an age difference that you can. I think, and we're lucky because with the kids we deal with up at UConn, and I think Jeff would agree, they have respect for what we do. If they see you every day, they understand who you are. So.
Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you for one tip on how we can best serve you. Give us one piece of sage advice about doing our jobs right.
Just think stories. That's it. That's our job. Our job is to tell stories. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But if you guys can think that's how we're thinking. So if you guys can think along those same lines, that'll help us tremendously.
You know what we do? Look at each reporter does their job differently. Look at the type of stories that a certain paper or a station may want to do, and get to know the people that you have to deal with on a regular basis.
Understand that we don't think that there are going to be times that we butt heads or we disagree with each other, but never take it personally.
Remember that you're in the yes business, not the no business. When a reporter asks for an interview or some type of access or to try to do a story, you can't always say yes, but find a way to say yes. Don't look for a way to say no.
Get the last word.
Be unbelievable in your interpersonal relationships with the media. Be strong enough and smart enough to deal with your bosses, to be able to tell them the truth and be understanding what they do. Because you're under constant pressure like that while you're dealing with that. And that's the art. And don't pretend to have the total answer, but I do know that that's what you guys are facing. And just when you're with the people that work with you regularly from the journalism standpoint, deal with them get to know them and dealing with them on a real personal basis. Be comfortable with them because the sparks are going to fly on a professional basis at different times. And if that relationship is strong when you're in a rush and lack of time and pressure makes cowards and idiots of all of us. And at that point, if you have a good rock solid relationship, that when that time, that crisis time comes, it'll pay off because you'll be able to work through that.
All right, guys, I'm going to lead these guys out and say thank you. If you could give them a gigantic round of applause.